Hello everyone, my name is Olivia and welcome to another Lord of the Rings reading vlog where I'm going to read The Two Towers for the first time in my entire life. If you did not watch my first Lord of the Rings reading vlog, I highly suggest that you do. I'll be sure to link it in the description. It surprisingly got a lot of attention from people who told me so much more about the series, who provided a lot of insight into Tolkien's writing process, and I really enjoyed the conversations that people were having in the comments, and a lot of people asked me to do a reading vlog for the sequel. So I decided to finally start The Two Towers after not reading a Lord of the Rings book for an entire year. I think I read the Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring last summer. So I started this a couple days ago and I'm already on chapter 5 and I have so many thoughts that I put into post-it notes to go through each chapter and share my thoughts about each individual one. But before we get into the breakdowns of the chapters that I've already read, I wanted to talk a little bit more about how I'm reading this book and the fact that I annotate some of my favorite books. So you'll see in my previous reading vlog and in this reading vlog that I highlight my favorite quotes, I highlight different lines in the text that further the plot and explain more about Middle-earth because I'm so new to the series that I want to highlight some important pieces of information. And in my previous reading vlog, I also wrote in the margins of the text, and a lot of people commented criticizing me for writing in the books that I own, that I spent my own money on. And I wanted to read an excerpt from a blog post from a university, which I will link down below if you want to read it as well, that explains more about the process of annotating books and the art of annotating books. So the blog post says, edits and annotations may have been to enhance the functionality of the book as well as the reading experience. These alterations to the text or appearance of the book reflect how the book as an object is not fixed. Instead, its existence is fluid and unstable, allowing adaptations that are tailored to the reader or the publisher's individual purposes. The book owner's agency to make edits and annotations thereby illustrate the personalized experience of reading. For me, whenever I annotate a book, I love returning back to my favorite lines. I love returning back to the notes that I made in the margins years before because that is a piece of my past that is captured within a book. You may not want to underline a book, you may not want to dog-ear your favorite book, but for me, having a conversation with myself in the text that I read enhances the reading experience, and criticizing people for the way that they read and digest a text is just asinine. It's not your book, it's not a real problem, so there's no need to make comments about it. So I wanted to address that before we get into the reading vlog. So now that we have that out of the way, I wanted to talk about the fact that I'm listening to the audiobook while I'm reading the book, and I'm specifically listening to the Two Towers audiobook narrated by Andy Serkis, who is the voice of Gollum. Andy Serkis is one of the most fantastic audiobook narrators that I've ever had the privilege of listening to. Since I've gotten into audiobooks, I've listened to like over 100 titles, and a lot of different narrators stand out to me in their ability to voice different characters and bring a story to life, and I truly think that Andy Serkis is my favorite audiobook narrator, especially because he worked on the set of The Lord of the Rings, so he's very familiar with all these different actors' voices, and he's able to bring it to life in a way that feels so immersive and exhilarating. When I read The Fellowship of the Ring, I was primarily reading it and I was voicing the characters in my mind, but I thought to myself, because I'm not the biggest fantasy reader, I wanted to dive into this sequel while listening to the audiobook because I felt like it was going to help me get through the novel faster and also just enjoy it more, because sometimes having someone read the text while I'm following along with my eyes makes it a little bit easier to digest. And since I've done that, I have felt so excited to read this book because Andy Serkis is so talented at bringing the story to life. He adds so much texture to the narrative, and the way that he voices the orcs is so haunting, and the way that he voices Legolas and Aragorn is so distinct, and it feels like the characters in the movies. Being able to listen to Andy Serkis bring this story to life has been such a delight, and I'm so excited to eventually get to a Gollum chapter to hear him voice Gollum, because he has to do the voice, right? Like, he has to bring the character back to life in his narration. I cannot recommend his rendition of the audiobooks enough. I truly think like that's the best way to absorb this story for the first time. It is just so delightful, so entertaining. And now let's get into my notes that I wrote for each chapter that I read so far. Oh, before we get into this, I hope you know that this reading vlog is going to contain spoilers for the Lord of the Rings series. I've seen all the movies, I've fallen in love with them at the age of 5. I have loved the Lord of the Rings for my entire life. My aunt and my mother introduced me to the series, the movie series. It completely changed my world. It introduced me into a world of fiction that I didn't want to escape, and I have such a fondness for the Lord of the Rings, so I know where the series is headed, I know the plot points, and I love being able to compare the movie to the text and how faithful an adaptation it really is. So do be warned, there are going to be spoilers for this entire series, especially for this book, because that's what we're reading today. So for chapter 1, I immediately wrote down that I can't believe that the death of Boromir is actually in chapter 1 of the Two Towers and not at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring, because that is like the ending pivotal moment of the film, and I think introducing it into the second book is really interesting. It already sets the tone that this series is going to get darker and darker the closer we get to Mount Doom and Mordor and the eventual battles that are going to happen. My friend is also reading the book at the same time as me, and we're discussing each chapter together, and she was like, I thought it was so interesting that Boromir dies off screen. He has such a big moment in the film, and I think it's really heartfelt, and it makes you really feel for him and understand his character more, and to have him die off screen was a really interesting choice from Tolkien. I love how one of my notes is the writing is stunning. Being able to listen to Andy Serkis narrate this book while also reading it made me realize that the descriptions are so lush. Like, of course I knew that from the first book, but it just reminded me how atmospheric Tolkien sets every single scene. He's able to bring this story to life. I feel like I'm transported to every single setting that he puts us in, and I'm obsessed with the way that he writes his stories. In the beginning chapters, we follow Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli while they're looking for Merry and Pippin. In the film, we see Merry and Pippin leave hints as to where they're being taken along the way, but in the beginning of the book, we only follow Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn, and it sets kind of a mysterious tone because you as the reader are wondering, where did Merry and Pippin go? Are they still alive? What happened to them? And then eventually we go into their point of view, we find out where they were taken, we find out that they are being taken by the Uruk-hai, and we see them escape into the forest where the Ents are. And I absolutely love the Ents. If I was not an elf or a hobbit in this world, I would absolutely be an Entwife, and I love the fact that Tolkien explains that the Entwives just kind of left because they weren't being appreciated by the Ents, and they thought that this one area of Middle-earth was prettier to grow and flourish in, and the Ents were like, no, this place is so much better. So the Entwives were like, okay, bye. And I thought that was really funny. I think it's just a really cute touch that they added into the series, and they also included in the movies. And I also wrote down that the Ents came to the conclusion to go to war quicker than in the movie, because in the movie it takes them nearly all of Two Towers to come to the conclusion that they should fight for the world. But in chapter 4 of the Two Towers, the Ents are already like, yeah, we should go to war. So those are my initial updates. I had so many things to share. I'm in love with this series. This is like truly such a fun time, and I'm really happy I decided to pick up the sequel because my aunt introduced me to the series. I felt like she was the master of the Lord of the Rings. She knew so much about the world, and she recently passed, and I actually did my Halloween costume after a Nazgul in honor of her because she loved the series so much. I love this series so much, and I actually saw the extended versions in theaters with my friends this year, and that inspired me to be a Nazgul for Halloween. So I'll be sure to link my different Nazgul Instagram posts down below so you can see more of the outfit that I created. I created the gauntlets, I sewed the cloak, I bought the sword, but I am so happy with how it came out. I think it came out exactly how I wanted it to be, and I'm really happy I was finally able to dress up as a Lord of the Rings character after loving it for so many years. It took me like, what, 22 years to finally make a Lord of the Rings outfit. I'm so happy with with it. And even though my aunt passed away just a couple days before I was able to take those photos, I was able to tell her about the fact that I was making the costume, and I'm really happy to know that I made it in her honor. And I think that we really captured the essence of the Nazgul in such a cool way. And if you're wondering why I did a Nazgul costume instead of like an Arwen or a Galadriel costume, I just really think the Nazgul look so cool, and I've always been obsessed with their costume, and I think that their gauntlets are amazing. I think their sword is so cool. I think their aura is fantastic. I think it's one of the most fantastic portrayals of a villain, and I've always wanted to dress up as them, so I'm really happy I was able to do that. I can't wait to talk more about Lord of the Rings in this reading vlog. I have so many thoughts to share. I have so much love towards this series. This series really like changed my life for the better and made me a reader, and yeah, I just love Lord of the Rings. I'm so obsessed with it.
But to the riders of the mark, it seems so long ago.
Where is the horn that was blowing? Where is the Helena Horde and the bright hair flowing?
Guys, we've leveled up and I've got a new mic and I'm so excited about it, so bear with me while I get used to it and I'm fiddling around with it. But I wanted to give you an update on Lord of the Rings. I have a couple of notes to share with you, but I'm officially on book 5, which is the second part of this book because it's split into book 4 and book 5. I have so many thoughts that I have to catch you up on. I haven't updated you in a while, so I said on chapter 5 that I would love a movie about Gandalf. I think he's such a fascinating character. He's so old, he's so powerful, and we don't necessarily explore the full extent of his power in this trilogy. We hear about it here and there, but he's such a mystery to everyone, and he's such a mystery to the reader because he doesn't share a lot about his life, but he carries so much power in this world, and that's mainly why he himself cannot take the ring, and I would love to learn so much more about him. And I also wrote down that I love when Shadowfax meets the trio being Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. I love Shadowfax, and my aunt actually bought me a stuffed animal white horse that was like around this size, and she was like, you could have your own Shadowfax, and I loved that stuffed animal. Like if I had my own horse, I would get a white horse and name it Shadowfax. I also really enjoyed Gandalf's description of him fighting off the Balrog. It's so fascinating that these two powerful beings in this earth had such an explosive fight together, and look at how much I underlined just for this page. I'm obsessed. I've been underlining backwards and forwards. I'm having so much fun in this world. I already love this world so much, and I'm just having such a great time with it. For chapters 7 and 8, I wrote that there's no battle at Isengard, and the Battle of Helm's Deep is a lot cooler in the film. The Battle of Helm's Deep in the film is so anxiety-inducing. No matter how many times you rewatch the movie, it feels so thrilling and it leaves you on the edge of your seat, and the way that they filmed it, where it took like 50 days to film that entire scene, is so impressive from like a filmmaking standpoint, and it just doesn't feel as grand in the book. And that's one thing that I just wanted to like note. I think that the battle scenes are so much cooler in the film. For me, I'm not like a big fantasy reader, so reading battles is a little bit difficult for me to like picture it in my mind. I also noted that we don't see the battle at Isengard in the book. We only ever hear about it from Merry and Pippin, who are recounting what happened to the trio and Gandalf. I think the battle at Isengard is so satisfactory to watch in the film because you see the Ents rise up, you see them fight against this symbol of just environmental destruction, and we see them fight for their land and their freedom and the world, and it's so fun to watch in the film because there was so much leading up to it. But in the book, it's only ever recounted as a memory, and I thought that was a really interesting way to go about it. And throughout this whole entire time, we do not see Frodo and Sam. And I'm like, I miss my boys so much. I love Frodo and Sam, and I love the way that Peter Jackson interspersed the book 4 and book 5 moments together. So they're happening simultaneously, and it feels much more cohesive to go through the story that way, because I miss Frodo and Sam, and now I'm finally on book 5 where I see Frodo and Sam, and Andy Serkis also does the voice of Gollum, and guys, I was so excited. I didn't know if he was gonna go like full out and like do the exact voice of Gollum, but he did, because of course he did. And I really do think he deserves a Grammy for narrating these audiobooks, because in case you don't know, you can get a Grammy for narrating an audiobook. That's how a lot of celebrities get an EGOT, because they may not necessarily be a singer, but they might narrate their memoirs and they can win a Grammy that way. So I think Andy Serkis most definitely should have been nominated for a Grammy, because I've never read an audiobook so well crafted, so immersive. It is such a fantastic audiobook, and I can't wait to listen to the eventual third book as well. And I really regret not listening to the first one, but I might go back and reread it and listen to him narrate that. I love how I put, I'm on book 5 and I finally see Frodo and Sam. I missed them. I love them. I love their relationship. I love how much Sam cares for Frodo. When he doesn't necessarily have to, he doesn't necessarily have to go on this journey, but he goes on this journey because he loves Frodo. And I think the overall message of love and care that these people have for each other is so profound, because there's so much love in Lord of the Rings, and the power of love can truly just change people's lives, change people's worlds. There are so many different books that express the power of caring for one another, and I think that this is a great example of it, because Sam risks his life and everything that he knew to help Frodo, and I can't wait to continue with this journey. And I also previously mentioned in my first episode of this Lord of the Rings series that I'm doing on here that I dressed up as Galadriel when I saw Lord of the Rings Return of the King with my cousins in theater. I found the photos. I love the outfits. I love the nostalgia. It felt so much grander to me as a kid than it does looking back at it at 27. But I think it's so special that my aunts and my mom created these outfits for us, and they really went all out to make this a very immersive experience for us, and a really exciting experience for us, because we watched the first 2 movies previously and we were eagerly anticipating the third one, and the fact that we saw it in theaters is so special. Like, I would love to relive that experience of the excitement and being able to see the third movie for the first time, not knowing anything that happens in the third movie because I never read the books as a 5-year-old. And I'm really happy that my cousins and I have that memory together, because it was all thanks to my aunt who introduced us to this series that kind of like changed our lives for the better. And I'm really happy I was able to find the photos. And I also have the movie ticket as well for Return of the King. But I think it's so cool that I have a ticket that says I saw Return of the King. I think that's like such a cool relic to have.
Red-eyed glowed. Now he was hidden in the dark shadow of it. He was coming to the top of the steps and was in the cleft at last.
I thought about how much Sam loves Frodo, and he said, "Don't go where I cannot follow, Mr. Frodo." And I burst into tears because there is not a love as strong as the love Sam has for Frodo. The way that he describes how he cannot continue living if Frodo's not by his side. And he said that he would continue the journey if he has to, but he will return back to Frodo and he's not going to continue on with his life without him. Yeah, it made me cry because it's so fucking beautiful. Are you kidding me? I did it. I finished The Two Towers, and this was such an enjoyable experience. Of course, I have some sticky notes. The first thing that I put on the sticky note is that Frodo doesn't fall into the lake of dead kings like he does in the movie. It's still a really grand journey that Frodo, Sam, and Gollum take together, but him not falling in the lake makes it feel a little bit less scary than what it actually is. I feel like that part of the movie, watching it as a child, was really horrifying to realize that these dead kings still have a hold over the land, and if you were to fall into the water, you would be somewhat eaten alive. And I think that not having that in the book was really interesting. I thought that that was included. And I also wrote down that there's no disguising under the cloak scene. You know, the scene in the movie where Frodo and Sam are looking at the gates of Mordor and they're wondering how they're going to get behind it, and they see some guards coming their way and Frodo kind of throws the cloak over the both of them and they look like a boulder. That's not in the book, and I love that scene. I find it to be so iconic. I find it really funny that the cloak looks perfectly like a boulder, and I thought that that scene, along with the lake scene, really heightens the tension and the stakes for Frodo and Sam, where they can easily be caught, easily be killed, and there are a lot of instances where it feels like the whole world is set against them, obviously. And in the book, it's not as thrilling, and they don't have those two moments where they could nearly die. And then I also wrote that Sam went into Shelob's lair, which is the spider at the end of The Two Towers. I love how I'm like recapping the movie like you have not seen it, but in the movie, Frodo goes into Shelob's lair by himself because prior to that, Frodo and Sam had gotten into a fight because of Gollum, because Gollum was manipulating them along the way and somewhat convinced Frodo that Sam wanted to take the ring from him. And it opens up a larger discussion of how would you act around Gollum? Because it always annoyed me when I was little that Sam was so mean to Gollum, and I feel like if I was put into that situation, I would be somewhat similar to Frodo in the sense where being cruel and being disgusted by someone isn't something that I would carry within my heart. And I think it's interesting that Sam is so mean to Gollum, and it can be broken down in so many ways. Is he mean to Gollum because he doesn't respect him? Is he mean to Gollum because he can see through his facade and he knows that Gollum wants to harm Frodo? I can see that too. Or does he dislike Gollum because he sees him as subhuman? Gollum is a really interesting character because is he even a hobbit anymore? Actually, was Gollum previously a hobbit? Let me see. Well, Smeagol. Yes, it says that Smeagol is a store hobbit of the river folk, so I previously called him a human, you know what I mean. Does Sam disrespect him and not see him as a hobbit anymore? It's so interesting that Sam is so mean to Gollum because Sam is a really good character in the sense where he's like a good person. He carries a lot of love in his heart. He's a very respectable person. He calls Frodo Mr. Frodo the whole time. He has a very large respect for people. And to see him kind of strip back his personality and become a really kind of like horrific version of himself towards Gollum always fascinated me because, again, there are so many different motives as to why he would act that way, and I always found it really surprising because Frodo continues to carry grace and respect in his heart no matter who he interacts with. So seeing that contrasted with the way that Sam interacts with Gollum was always something that I wanted broken down even further. And the fact that Gollum didn't convince Frodo to leave Sam in the book was really interesting, because I always felt like Frodo would never do that, and I always felt a little bit out of character in the movie, and knowing that he didn't do that in the book makes me feel a little bit better, because I don't think that anything would ever truly separate Frodo and Sam. Also, yeah, I cried when I read this, because the relationship between Frodo and Sam is so beautiful. There's so much love, there's so much heart, there's so much respect there. Sam really looks up to Frodo, he looks up to the burden that he's carrying, and Sam will do anything to help uplift that. It's just such a beautiful relationship to know that Sam is with him until the end. I loved Frodo and Sam, and I even saw a theory on Tumblr one time where they were like, Sam is the true protagonist of Lord of the Rings, and I deeply disagree with that. One, because Frodo just feels like the protagonist of Lord of the Rings, but one can even make a further argument that there is no true protagonist of Lord of the Rings, because each character carries a very heavy weight of importance for the plotline. There would not be a story without Gandalf, there would not be a story without Aragorn, there would not be a story without Gollum. It doesn't feel like there's a true protagonist and hero of the story. So I don't necessarily agree with the fact that Sam is the hero of the journey. I think that every character is the hero in some way, minus Gollum being the anti-hero. I just didn't agree with that argument. I would love to hear your thoughts about it. I don't remember where I read it. I believe I read it on Tumblr, so I won't be able to link it, but it's something that I've seen circulated around, and I would love to get your thoughts on it. But I had such a great time reading The Two Towers for the first time. Andy Serkis's narration truly elevated the experience, and it made me enjoy it that much more. And I hope you enjoyed me sharing my thoughts and my musings about the story and how it compares to the movie. I loved the extra bits that were included in the story that didn't make it to the screen. I loved comparing the extra scenes that were in the movie that weren't in the book, and I would love to hear what you think about The Two Towers. Is it your favorite installment in the series? Do you enjoy Return of the King, the book, even more? I cannot wait to read Return of the King soon, and I saw that it is nearly half full of appendices, and I was wondering if that's like worth the read, and if Andy Serkis is also going to read the appendices, because it is full of extra information, and I'm wondering if that's what Rings of Power is based on, because I don't think that Rings of Power is centered around the Silmarillion. I believe it's based on the appendices, right? I have no idea. I could easily Google this, but you guys can provide me the answers either way. But I hope you enjoyed this reading vlog. If you want to follow me anywhere else on social media, I am very active over on Instagram and Threads, and all my social media links will be down below. If you've made it this far in the reading vlog, leave a leaf emoji of your choice to commemorate making it to the end of this reading vlog. If you have, thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much for watching this video, for liking, for commenting, for subscribing, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!